Well, welcome to all of you. Here we are on part 6. Hard to believe. Part 6. And so welcome to everyone who is here and also who will be listening later. Let's begin with the opening prayer. At the beginning of the day, we seek your countenance among us, O God, in the countless forms of creation all around us, in the sun's rising glory, in the face of friend and stranger, your presence within every presence, your light within all light, your heart at the heart of this moment. May the fresh light of morning wash our sight, that we may see your life in every life this day. Amen. So as I said, today is part 6 of Unraveling the Strands of Christian Nationalism. Like I said, hard to believe we're at part 6 already. We're at the halfway point. I figure we're probably going to have about 12 parts once we take into account a couple breaks in November. I intend to go through mid-December with this. Through December 14th. That's my plan. Just want to say today we're going to continue talking about what is a Judeo-Christian nation, part 2. Next week I want to just take a little, what I call it, excursus and talk about what is the gospel, because I think what is the gospel pertains to this whole issue, and then talk a little bit about what someone has called vertical morality and horizontal morality. And that all plays into what is the gospel and what is our response to the gospel. But I also want to say, if you pay attention to anything in the news, or what's written, you're seeing a lot. Someone has said there's an avalanche of items being written about this topic now. That's out there from various perspectives. I want to say that each writer, even the writers that I use, approach this a little differently. But what I'm trying to do is just give you an overall picture of what I call movement encompasses. Just to review, remember some of the chords or strands we talked about was, what are some of the strands in this? Well, white supremacy is one of the strands that weaves its way through this. And we talked about Christian dominionism, or Christian reconstructionism, or theonomy, also finds a home in this movement. And what I see with this movement, and you may agree or disagree with me, is that all of these groups or all of these sub-movements that have been around for decades are sort of finding a place under this big umbrella of Christian nationalism and are starting to emerge, starting to show themselves. And we'll see that with this first piece, the Christian nationalists rewriting American history. Now here's a name I talked about, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, Douglas Wilson, when I was talking about Christian dominionism. This author writes, Douglas Wilson's rising influence show how the past is at the center of today's culture wars. And that's also verbiage we're starting to hear. Culture wars. Has anyone heard about the Share the Arrows event? A women's conference that was held in early October. Share the Arrows. They were there to combat or to engage in the culture wars. So you're going to see that language become prominent. In his talk, referring to Douglas Wilson at the 2025 National Conservative Conference, known as NatCon, last month, September, Idaho pastor and co-founder of the Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches, Douglas Wilson, argued that the United States is at war over two different origin stories. One of these stories, he said, is built on lies and is a form of apostasy. It is advanced in colleges and universities by regime historians, advancing the popular mythology that the American founding was thoroughly deist. Wilson unequivocally believes that the United States was founded as a Christian republic for a Protestant population. He claims that 50 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Orthodox Christians. By Orthodox, he means true, not the Eastern Orthodox with a capital O, but true Christians. He notes that the United States Constitution ends with the phrase, "the year of our Lord, 1787. He mentions Church of the Holy Trinity versus United States, the 1892 Supreme Court decision in which David Brewer, the justice who wrote the majority opinion, claimed that the United States was a Christian nation. Wilson even goes so far as to claim that during the American Revolutionary War, George Washington led an army of Calvinists. So just remember who Douglas Wilson is. Go back to part 4 that we read under the quiet rise of Christian dominionism. So Wilson has emerged as one of the faces on this Christian nationalist movement. And you'll see writers will interact with his writings or what he's saying. Like I said, these small groups over time have emerged now under this big umbrella, this big movement called Christian nationalism. Just think of the Christian Reconstructionists, Christian dominionism. That's been around since the 1950s and now has basically found a resting place where they can be legitimately recognized.
Can you explain that a little bit more? Christian Reconstruction?
Yeah, I would refer you back to part 4, Christian dominionism, where basically Christian dominionism is the belief that Christians should take moral, spiritual, and ecclesiastical control over society. And with that is that, again, I'm being very broad, that they would reconstruct society according to their understanding of Mosaic law. So I refer you back to part 4 where we went through that, and it writes up the history of it. They talk about a Christian version of government. Again, go back to part 4 to dig deeper. It's who's going to rule in this society, in this government. And some hold that it's going to be one vote per family, with the male being the voter. And that's just interpretation of how do we practically make this happen? And they still haven't quite figured that out. Yes, John.
Just a small thing. We all appreciate the way you refer us to previous discussion, because I believe there's some people here who represented everyone. Do you have copies of some of them?
I passed out, everyone's had copies.
Yeah, but some people haven't been here.
Right, I've given out past copies.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I try.
misunderstood.
No, I try to do that every week to make sure everybody that I can catch gets.
It's all online, right?
It is online, and yeah, and some, yeah. So that's yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So,
Normally, women outlive men.
well, yeah. I mean, we could go down that rabbit hole forever. So, and I'm not here to break Christian dominionism apart. I'm just saying, my main point is that it has found a place where it's legitimately recognized, and people that are swept up under this Christian nationalism movement don't understand what all the underlying pieces are to it, or as I said, what the strands are. Yes, Ed.
I mean, just one thing that, like, how do they reconcile that there's so many people who consider themselves Christian, but there's no agreement about what that means, like a consensus. Somebody might believe it means speaking in tongues, somebody else might mean, don't use medicine, relying on God. It might, I mean, there's such a wide spectrum.
It's simple when everyone else is wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And
That's
And so I want to touch on some of that next week when I talk about what is the gospel, and then how people can justify their belief in God and yet treating others in a very hateful manner. Sorry, Jeff, did I hopefully got you close?
Well, I think we're hitting on it. I mean, what I see is, and what I feel is an angst being here. And the reason why is because I don't understand how this group, it's like we're playing volleyball with something that's going to explode out there in the future. And I mean, you've been talking about it. I love to say I have 4 children, one of each kind. It just confuses people when I say that, but they're all different, especially so. We all are, and our children are, and we're extremely proud of them. But they learn who they are here in these halls, okay? Yet the discussion that we're having doesn't happen over there in church, and I'm not sure I understand why. And yet you hear all these stories of different churches in different states where you need to wear a longer skirt when you come to church, in this church, or you need to wear your hair up and covered in this church. And that spills out, and then, going to and from Asheville, I finally figured out what that Confederate flag was all about. It was a warning to people going to Asheville, because Asheville has a history and a reputation. So don't get caught up in that when you're on your way to Asheville. And so that's just me talking, and I'm sure that I'm stupid, and I'm much smarter than I am. Shut up.
No. We're all learning together, but why I chose to do this is to help, first of all, myself understand, but help others understand what really is going on and what are the strands that are coming together with this movement. And we all have friends or neighbors that are somehow buying into some of this, just in a sort of just a happenstance way, because they're where this is being, some of this is being pushed. And so I just, yes, you start thinking about it, you could have a lot of anxiety. You have a lot of anxiety with this. Yes.
Honestly, I had anxiety before having this class, but this has actually helped to validate and help me understand some of the things that I've been experiencing that have been quite painful, honestly. And it just helps me have greater perspective, not necessarily answers, but perspective. And so I personally have found it helpful and kind of needed for me. So thank you.
You're welcome. Let me continue with this writer's critique. Wilson chides the regime historians for manipulating the past to promote a progressive political agenda and secular worldview. But by ignoring a wealth of evidence that might complicate his preferred origin story, he engages in the same form of manipulation that he despises in his political enemies. Was the British American population largely Protestant at the time of the founding? Yes. Did they practice their Protestant faith? Some did. But it is also true that people joined churches at a much higher rate today than they did in the 18th century. Church membership in the colonies was less than 50%, and that is a very generous estimate. Some scholars put membership as low as 17%. Very few of the founding fathers and none of the major figures we studied in high school history classes, including Franklin and Jefferson, were deists in the pure sense of the word. They all believed in a God who sustained the world by his providence and sometimes even intervened in human affairs. Some were Christians, some rejected Christian orthodoxy. But they were all countercultural. They were all, even the Christians, men of the Enlightenment. They knew they were creating a government for a Christian people, but they built the republic with safeguards in place to prevent privileging one religion over others. In doing so, they drew heavily on modern ideas that were gaining traction in the 18th century republic of letters. The founders championed religious freedom, not religious toleration. The former celebrates liberty of conscience for all people. The latter suggests something akin to, we don't really want you here, but we will tolerate you. Thomas Jefferson went out of his way to make sure the Declaration of Independence said nothing about a Christian God who died for the sins of the world and rose from the dead. The framers of the United States Constitution banned religious tests for office holding. This writer asks, would the creators of a Christian republic reject the idea of an established church or offer the free exercise of religion to all Americans as they did in the First Amendment? If they were serious about building such a Christian republic, why didn't they just openly declare that only Christians could run for office in the federal government? Why didn't they make Christianity the official religion of the United States? History offered them plenty of examples of this sort of Christian civilization. In John Calvin's Geneva and John Winthrop's Massachusetts Bay, heretics were executed. Douglas Wilson fails to tell the full truth about our history. He and the National Conservatives are building a political movement around an incomplete view of the American founding. As we approach the 250th anniversary of the United States, let's tell a more thorough, complex, and frankly, more accurate origin story. And that's just this one writer, an historian, John Fee, who has written numerous books, including Was the United States Founded as a Christian Nation? Just throwing his view out there about how do we, what do we do with Douglas Wilson's view? And we're going to hear the 250th anniversary is coming. we're going to hear all kinds of origin stories about why the United States was founded, and is it a Christian nation, and that type of thing. So that's out there. What I also found interesting, I picked out this insert from Gorski, Perry, and Tismey's book, White Christian Nationalism's Deep Story. White Christian nationalism's deep story goes something like this. America was founded as a Christian nation by white men who were traditional Christians, who based the nation's founding documents on Christian principles. The United States is blessed by God, which is why it has been so successful, and the nation has a special role to play in God's plan for humanity. But these blessings are threatened by cultural degradation from un-American influences, both inside and outside our borders. Remember, I started telling you about this language of the culture wars. And we're having conferences to equip us how to deal with culture wars, however those culture wars are defined. But this story is a myth. The religious views of the founders ranged widely, from atheism through deism and Unitarianism to Congregationalism, Baptist, and even Roman Catholicism. The Declaration and the Constitution drew on various influences, including classical liberalism, for example, Locke, and civic republicanism, for example, Machiavelli. More than a little of the nation's wealth and prosperity were derived from stolen land and slave labor. These are well-established historical facts. So I just wanted to lay out, because we hear that, and we've been here, that, we were founded as a Christian nation. That's been the line that I can remember hearing from the 70s. And then our policies and practices as a nation, if they're built on that premise, some of them are suspect in my opinion. And just like, and we'll talk more about, because this comes back to the end times. But, and here's a hot topic, the nation of Israel today. The nation of Israel today. Some of our elected officials go back into Genesis and quote Genesis for why we should give unwavering support to the nation of Israel today. I don't want to get into a big debate about Israel, but I'm just saying, it goes, there are, and I can point them out, they go back to the book of Genesis and quote Genesis, why we should be show unwavering support to the nation of Israel. That's just one example. I'm sorry I'm rushing through, but are there any comments?
Couple things.
Yes.
I've been blessed. My dad was in the military, so I've lived in a lot of places in the world and in the United States. And the other week I talked about, like Rob did this morning, about tithing. I had in my hand a history of the Way family that goes back to the 1600s. What I didn't know, and what I've come to find out, my dad's family grew up in Tappan, New York. What you don't know about Tappan, New York is that's where Major Andre, a British spy, an American spy for the British, was tried and executed. George Washington was the general in charge there. That was in my dad's backyard, okay? That's a Dutch Reformed community, okay? Tappan, New York, off the Tappan Zee Bridge. I joined the service and I go down to Biloxi, Mississippi, and there I am in the Church of the Redeemer, which just happens to be Jefferson Davis's Episcopal Church. And that's where I got confirmed by the bishop, okay? Around this world, there are communities of different religions that have been there for centuries because that started the community, okay? You come along in Biloxi, Mississippi, I had enlisted in the service. So now the term God, country, and family comes to be, yet we don't understand what God is because our vision of God is where we grew up in, okay? And yet we're defending this entire nation, and people have taken actionable responses to people that they thought that were different or whatever, and it's just created a mass of confusion. I doubt that the Christian nationalism can even be defended in the courts because there's no law, I don't think. And yet, I'm just scared to death of the future of what might come out of some other place of somebody else's idea of what needs to be taken in the way of action.
Well, I would say all of us are concerned for one reason.
Scared to death works for me.
So, Deacon Joe, would you say that what this group of people is advocating for is a theocracy?
Some are, yes. Yes. And that what I'm trying to say also is that these folks have been around for decades. They've been around for decades. But the atmosphere has allowed them now to emerge and be given places of legitimacy and recognition.
That's because of the internet.
Well, yes, that's true. But I would go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, Pete Hegseth is a member of the CRT.
Yes, he's a member of yes of this. Yes, of the. He is a member of the
Community of Reformed Evangelical Church.
yes, yes, of which Douglas Wilson was a co-founder. Yes. Yeah, I would just say, we all have our angst, we all have our fears. We realize, we serve a God that is greater than all of this. When I talk next week, I want to talk about God's love in giving us the gospel, and how does the gospel interact with this? So I'm running out of time. I always tell people I need an hour. I can't work with a half hour. But the question for reflection this week I put down: can religious traditions strengthen democratic values and principles? Why or why not? So let's use the closing prayer, the prayer of blessing. Peace where there is war, healing where there is hurt, memory where we have forgotten the other, vision where there is violence, light where there is madness, sight where we have blinded each other, comfort where there is sorrow, tears where there is hardness, laughter where we have missed life's joy, laughter when we remember the joy. May the light of God illumine the heart of my soul. May the flame of Christ kindle me to love. And may the fire of the Spirit free me to live this day, tonight, and forever. Amen. Thank you, folks.